Thank you for joining our Signal Media Webinar Series. I'm Kimberly Underwood, Director of Digital News Media at AFCEA International Signal Magazine. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar entitled Building an Operational Technology Control System Cybersecurity Workforce, a Whole of Government Challenge, which is sponsored by Dragos. We have a great panel today as part of Dragos' Federal Webinar Series with several experts who will discuss what it takes to build a critical infrastructure cyber protection workforce. They'll look at all the levels of what's needed in this important security field. For our audience members, I'd like to point you to the Resources tab. You'll find some more information about Dragos and some actually very helpful resources. There's a sheet about getting started in cybersecurity that applies specifically to industrial control systems, or ICS. That's an acronym we'll use a lot today, ICS. There's a particularly helpful curated list of resources and recommendations from Robert M. Lee, who's the CEO of Dragos. You'll see the link there. It goes to his website, robertmlee.org. Be sure to check out the website of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. They have a great collection of ICS-related information, including links to free training offered by CISA and the federal government for ICS practitioners and community members. Dragos also recommends the SANS ICS homepage. It's a great one-stop shop for ICS news, training, and security resources. That's at sans.org. You'll see the link there. And then Dragos themselves offers operational technologies certification, OT cert, and they host a community of interest for OT practitioners to help bridge the resource gap in cybersecurity. So check out their website, www.dragos.com/OT-CERT, C-E-R-T. And this website is designed to support asset owners and operators of industrial infrastructure. And it provides free cybersecurity resources for the industrial control system and OT community at large. So check those out under the Resources tab. Okay, let's get to our experts. First, I'd like to introduce Chuck Weissenborn, who leads Dragos' efforts to support the Department of Defense and intelligence community in their efforts to secure control systems and associated operational technologies, or OT. Prior to joining Dragos, Chuck worked at Symantec, which later became Broadcom Corp, where he was responsible for all business operations supporting the U.S. Army across the globe. In addition, Chuck is a member of the Army National Guard, where he leads the Cybersecurity Detachment for the Critical Infrastructure Protection Battalion, the CIPBN, at the West Virginia National Guard. The CIP Battalion provides mission assurance assessments and risk reduction recommendations across the DoD, with National Guard teams aligned in the Department of Army Headquarters, G357 office, at DISA, and other agencies. Prior to joining the West Virginia National Guard, Chuck was a member of the Texas National Guard for over 18 years, with assignments that included the SC Non-Commissioned Officer in Charge, or NCOIC, for the 36th Combat Aviation Brigade, and with the Texas Defensive Cyber Operations Element. He recently returned from deployment with the U.S. Cyber Command Area of Responsibility, the CENTCOM AOR, where he supported the Long-Range Precision Fires mission. Next on the panel, we have a Marine. Dr. William Butler is presently the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Capital Technology University. Before this appointment in 2021, Dr. Butler served as the school's cybersecurity chair for 8 years. Earlier in his career, he worked in the networking and IT industries as a network engineer and consultant for more than 20 years. Dr. Butler retired from the Marine Corps as a colonel after 30 years of service, active and reserve duty. And his most recent position with the Marines, he served as a Joint Qualified Communications Information Systems Officer. Next, I'd like to introduce Mark Bristow, who is the director of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Protection Innovation Center at MITRE. Before joining MITRE, he was the director for the Hunt and Incident Response Team, or HURT, at CISA, where he leveraged his expertise in incident response, industrial control systems, network monitoring, and defense, all to support national security interests. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. And Chuck, with that, I'll turn it over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. And as mentioned, my name is Chuck. I work at Dragos, and I'm responsible for supporting the Defense Department and intelligence community. And recently, we started a federal webinar series focused on providing information, advice, and expertise and access to industry for the federal government and its partners focused on operational technology, industrial control systems, cybersecurity. The environment that we're living in today is much different from the world that we were in 10, 15 years ago. We have multiple threat actor groups that are all focused on impacting our nation's most sensitive missions and our ability to do things like manufacture or even go to work by targeting control systems that by either their age or potentially how they're designed are sometimes inherently vulnerable to cybersecurity effects. And I'm so thankful to have Dr. Butler and Mark on the line with us today to kind of share their thoughts around one of what I consider are the three pillars of things that we need to be successful in defending operational technology, and that's workforce. So I'd like to invite first Mark and then Bill Butler to just give a couple of comments around what they think the state of the threat environment in operational technology is from your perspective, and then talk a little bit about the importance of workforce and workforce development. Over.
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks for inviting me to be on this really important panel because. I'll tell you, over my career, I've learned that, technology, we often focus on technology as and cybersecurity is a technology problem. And to me, it's really it's a people one, right? And without the people, the right people with the right skills and the right experience, we're not going to be very successful in closing down some of these gaps. So really happy to be talking about this with you all today. To your question, though, about the kind of overall threat landscape, I think that I've been doing incident response in control systems since the mid-2000s. And in my time, I've really seen a change in the focus of attention industrial control systems are having. I remember having conversations in the 2006 or 7 timeframe with people who really just wouldn't believe when you would say that you could successfully impact the physical world with a cybersecurity intrusion on a control system environment. Of course, since then we had Stuxnet, which kind of proved that theory at a minimum, and then many other incidents. But then we really kind of kicked off where you see this timeline of maturation where adversaries and threat actors, both state-aligned, not as state-aligned, mature, immature, are looking at capabilities to hold our control systems at risk. This is now a lever of power that different organizations for their different political ends consider something that they want to try and pull. And while, don't get me wrong, different adversaries have very different levels of successful capabilities and how your defenses are architected. There's so many things that matter in the details about how to actually create an impact in a control system environment with cyber effects. But it's now in the calculus. And so we are, I think, at a key time in cybersecurity for industrial control systems where we still have time to kind of seize the initiatives. Our adversaries have learned a lot, but at the end of the day, we still own and operate these systems, and we have the opportunity to do better. But we now also have to start doing some of this at a scale that I don't think that we really thought of before. One of the things that often would trouble me when doing incident response was often I'd be working with asset owner operators who would say something to the effect of, I have no idea why I would ever be targeted by XYZ bad guy, right? That's not a choice that we get to make, right? The adversaries are the one that choose who they target, not us. But we do get to choose what we do about that. And that's where having well-trained, capable, exercised staff becomes absolutely critical to successfully, navigating the waters of having a contested space in the control system. And it's only going to happen more and more. So really important topic, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark. Bill, over to you.
Yeah, again, Chuck, thank you and Dragos for inviting me. And I want to echo some of what Mark is saying. You know, the most important secret ingredient out here in cyber defense are having enough personnel, but not only enough personnel, but those with the right skill set. And I'm an educator at this point. I was a consumer at one point, hiring people. Now I educate young cyber professionals, and the thing that got me hot on this topic was that my students participated in a lot of cyber competitions, and they started to come back and say, Dr. Butler, we're seeing a lot of what they call OT and cyber competitions now. We were not prepared for that. Uh, Academic programs across the country in the Centers of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense are focused on IT. Very few programs are focused on OT or IoT, if you will. The last three competitions were Hack the Building, Hack the Port, and now Hack Space, right? So they're all some IT, but mostly that operational technology. So from where I sit, I have to address that as an educator. I got to give Mark the people that he needs. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to change our content of our programs. The professors have to be trained. We've got to increase capacity. And that area, we're already short in IT and OT, we're even shorter. So this is a big challenge for academia. And this is what we're going to talk about some today is how do we remedy that? How do we address it? How do we help?
Thanks, Dr. Butler. Appreciate it very much. So one of the things that's been a common theme across the entire industry is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals across the board in all skill sets. Being in kind of the specialized field for so long, Mark, what has been your experience with the availability and quantity of workforce that's knowledgeable and capable to be effective in operational technology environments?
Yeah, I'll say that I've had the opportunity to work alongside a lot of different organizations, supporting them through some of their toughest things that they've faced, right? And I've seen a lot of differences in how organizations handle that, and a lot of it, to me, comes down to the type of people that they have there supporting their incident response, right? And it varies. You have some organizations that are well practiced, have policies, procedures in place, have people who've been trained in the skill of responding to incidents, the skill to doing so in a control system environment, the skill to managing incidents as a broad topic, and you have other organizations who are doing their best, but maybe not having as much success. And really, to me, it comes down to a couple of things. Organizations that I've seen be successful in this area are ones that have prioritized this effort, right? And it starts with the top. I've worked with large multinational oil corporations with lots of resources, with terrible security and terrible practices. And I've worked with small little water utilities that, I would challenge any adversary to try and get into their system because, quite frankly, it's not going to happen. And really, it's an organizational culture thing where leadership prioritized building out their capability and building out their training. One of the things that has frustrated me over the years is that there's not a lot. There are some, but there's not a lot of formalized training available for control system cybersecurity broadly, let alone doing incident response and control systems. There's definitely some. I'm a SANS instructor on the side. I teach an incident response class that Rob Lee wrote for that. And one of the reasons I do that is because I recognize this is a problem. There's different universities have that out there, right? Bill represents one. But we don't have the throughput we need to really train up the people and get them the experience that they need. The other thing that I've seen as a key to success is exercising. So it's super important to train your people so they know what to do the right thing. And it's even more important to have them actually run through an activity when it's not a real scenario, right? And I think that our disaster management colleagues know this very, very well. in the way that they exercise, train, and practice for event management. And I think that we could learn a lot about that, because if you don't exercise your plan, you're never going to be able to improve your plan, and you're never going to be able to improve your people. And I'll tell you that probably the number one thing that I ever brought to an incident response engagement wasn't technical. It was being calm. I used to tell people that their worst day is my Tuesday. And that the value add that I would bring for organizations was, I've seen this probably before because I've trained for it, I've exercised it, I did it as a career, and having that past experience really helps you center at a time when it's very easy to make rash ad hoc decisions, which is probably the worst thing you can do. So having that exercise capability in addition to training is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mark, for sure. So, Dr. Butler, kind of looking at the academia side of the equation, from your foxhole, what do you see as kind of some of the essential skills that you focus on training y'all students on, for control system cybersecurity?
Yeah, some of the things that we're focusing on in the academic program, of course, are the new protocols that are a totally different world for operational technology. So we're going back and looking at the networking classes. There are controls. Let me back up a little bit. We're fortunate to have an engineering program alongside the computer science and cybersecurity. So the engineers understand this, and we've gone to the engineering departments, teach us about controls, control systems, teach us about sensors, teach us how to integrate that knowledge into our cybersecurity program, so our students will understand. We talk about industrial control systems. What is at the center of that system? What sort of networks do they operate on? What sort of protocols do they communicate in? And even beyond that is the physical security. A lot of our programs don't emphasize the physical security and the access control primarily. We begin to focus on that with a new lab. I did the identity management lab along with an industrial control system lab, where students will learn how to control access, both physical and logical, into these types of networks, understand the protocols. And we have a education SOC where a student has learned traditionally how to monitor IT infrastructure. We're beginning to integrate the OT infrastructure into our monitoring stations. And the next step, as we said, how do you detect how do you know you're under attack? How do you know you were attacked? Or how do you know you're safe? We're going through those scenarios with students. How do you detect an incident in this new world for students, and incident handling? How do you respond to that incident? Are the things we teach you in for forensics courses, do they still apply? Do malware analysis, reverse engineering, do all of those courses and content that we taught you, do they still apply in the OT world? So we're a little bit of a struggle with that, but we're going to get help from industry to help us determine what we need to be teaching in those classes.
Thanks so much, Bill. So I want to highlight two things that both of our panelists kind of mentioned a second ago. One is the role of and the position of cybersecurity programs within school structures themselves. I think it's really exciting to see more and more programs, especially those that are trying to help people get spun up and educated on operational technology and control systems, housed within engineering departments. Because to me, the engineering aspects of OT cyber are critically important to being able to be successful. Because if you don't understand the process, if you don't understand the physics and the impacts that are possible when the physics change, it's almost impossible to be able to prioritize security and do appropriate risk management at any level of an organization. So understanding and having that tie into industry, I really got to applaud you guys at CTU for making that a focus, as well as several other programs that are out there, Texas A&M, Idaho State. There's a few other programs that are really getting after that, University of Houston as well. and it's encouraging to see that combination. And Mark, you talked a second ago, and you mentioned kind of in some of the things that you teach, focus around forensics and incident response. That is, I think, one of our large gaps, especially when we lift off of what could be an information technology system within a control system environment, right? Like an engineering workstation or a Windows-based human-machine interface in HMI. And when we have to pivot down to programmable logic controllers, protection relays, and even further potentially, depending on the situation, have you seen anybody working to address those kind of lower level gaps around forensics in particular? Mark?
Yeah, Chuck. So I'll answer your question in a second, but I want to just footstop something that you said there, which is, physics matters when it comes to doing control system cybersecurity. Most cybersecurity curricula don't, include physics classes. And if you don't understand, the whole challenge of this domain is, we're at the intersection of, like, what I would say, the intersection of cyberspace and meat space. Right? We are where the cyber interacts with the physical world. And that means we have to know about both the cyber world, where I think we are a little bit more robust in our capabilities, and then the physical world, right? And so that is the big challenge, right? And if you're not taking a physics class as a control systems cybersecurity professional as your education, in a formal education environment, something's not right. And that's why, just to echo your point, like being involved in the engineering departments, I think is a good strategy for academic institutions looking to educate people in this space. So yeah, it's spot on. But to your broader question about the low level devices. So yeah, you're right. It is challenging to do forensics analysis at these lower levels. I've seen some companies and some organizations trying to build tools and capabilities to do that. One of the big challenges they run into is, even though we don't really have a lot of diversity in control systems from a kind of the major manufacturer's perspective, many control systems environments are kind of bespoke, right? Scene one control system. And a lot of times the implementation, the life cycles of our devices means that, if you're doing IT incident response, you can expect the oldest computer you're going to find is like a Windows 7 box. When I was doing incident response, I carried around a floppy drive because we used to run into NT4 computers that only had, floppy drives, right? Still in production today. So, the diversity really makes the forensics aspect a challenge, because even if you develop a tool, it may not be as universally applicable as it is on the IT front. Now, there's a silver lining to this problem, though, and that's that, quite frankly, many of our adversaries are not operating at that level. You're not seeing a lot. There are some big headline cases though, where control systems device manipulation was a key component that was not observable anywhere else. And so, again, we've got a little bit more time to sort this out. So I'm hopeful. But it's a challenge that, as adversaries build their capabilities, they're going to be more capable in this area, and we're going to have to really address this.
Sure, I think we're starting to see that, especially with the pipe dream malware that was, published about a month and a half, a month or two ago, right? Where the Swiss Army knife of capabilities aligned to controller level devices has now been discovered. Thankfully, it was not employed right before it was discovered. But definitely agree with you that we're going to start seeing, and I think we will see in the future, adversary capabilities continue to increase and get more laser focused on levels where they feel like they can live without getting detected, perhaps. Dr. Butler, pivoting over back to you, you talked, about things like protect and detect, which sound very much like the cybersecurity framework, right, that's been published. What do you see as the role of some of the documentation that organizations like NIST and ISA publish in the academia world? How do you see a way? Do you see a way forward for integrating those things into training curriculum?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because our program, because our university is very federal focused, so we use NIST publications, DISA publications, NSA publications a lot in our program. When a student goes through our program, they're very familiar with them, and plus they're free, right? It's a no-brainer for us. They're standards for the government. They're recommended for industry. We lean on them quite a bit. So all of our students will be very versed in the NIST publications, especially the recent ones on OT. I think they call it the network of things, and those are very important to us, and they help us to integrate it for education as well as train students as to what you're going to see when you graduate. We're very focused on preparing them for the workplace, and for that reason, we use NIST publications a lot. Glad you asked that question.
So when we're talking about building capability within, say, the Department of Defense, where training institutions are typically very regimented, Dr. Butler, you have years of military experience, and Mark, you've been in the federal government and working alongside the federal government for a long time. What do you guys see as valid approaches for building like an OT cybersecurity training pipeline, particularly within the DoD?
Well, I'll kick it off. I think that the Army has done a decent job of putting together a training pipeline that can take a capable and hungry staff driver and turn him into a cyber operator. It's an intense training program they've put together, but I would kind of look to that as like one of the gold stars in some of the training pipelines that are put out there. But I'll say one of the things I think that's been a challenge, certainly from my time in the federal government, putting together those types of pipelines is expensive. It's time consuming. It requires a lot of focus. You need people who are focused on just building that pipeline. And it's a challenge. I know from the broader cyber workforce perspective, DHS was working with NIST on the NICE framework to like categorize different groups and do key skills analysis and all those things. You'll note that there is no industrial control systems domain expert in that particular framework. But even as it works for IT, there's a lot of effort that needs to go into just identifying the KSAs, the key skills and abilities that are needed, and then train to them and then test them to make sure people are qualified. I think DoD has done a good job of this. They definitely took a very DoD approach to that problem, and I think the Army is leading out there. But I still think there's room for improvement, and some of that is that there is not a robust catalog. We mentioned a couple of different universities that have these types of programs, but if you were to compare that to the number of universities offering, say, cyber courses broadly, or just programming, software development courses, you'd see orders of magnitude of difference. And so we need to figure out how we can get more throughput on this problem and more high quality education opportunities for people out there as we're trying to scale to this challenge.
So I think it's really interesting that you brought back up the universities that are working in the space, because I think this is maybe a great place for the DoD and the rest of the federal government to partner with academia and not have to reinvent the wheel, right? I think there's a great potential to, register students for courses that may be hosted in their area, focused around things that the federal government may not have domain expertise in, especially the physics side of this problem set. But I also think there's an interesting potential for industry. And when I say industry, looking at utility providers and maybe even the OEM community, right? The Honeywells, the Siemens, the SELs, Johnson Controls of the world too, to maybe be part of that training pipeline for our federal government, cyber folks, in terms of, things like, maybe a, training with industry opportunity, if you were using DoD parlance, or on the academia side, Dr. Butler, could you talk a little bit about, some of your thoughts around, maybe internships and things like that?
Sure. One of the things that we found that has been very successful in the traditional cybersecurity or even computer science and engineering model is that the most successful students I've seen over the years are, first of all, they had a good preparation in high school. They usually have gone to a STEM high school or Cisco Academy, and not all the time. Some have to overcome their, you can't help where you live, right? Sometimes as a kid. So, but we found that even those students that have found a way to learn in Excel, to learn programming, to learn networking, to learn IT, once they enter college, is the success factors for them are the competitions. If I see a kid that's competed in First Robotics, Vex Robotics, Cyber Patriot, rocketry clubs, almost any of the League of Legends club or whatever, that student has a leg up on their peers. That means that they've taken the initiative to really become a young professional before they're a professional. Then it's the internships, and then it's the research with faculty, students that work inside in the labs, that work with faculty, that do internships. You are getting the cream of the crop if they've done all of that. And I think we need to have the same model for this new specialty, in our field. But we need help because I can't just go out and buy critical infrastructure and put it in my lab. I guess I could, but we need help from industry. We need the utility industries, construction, electrical, mechanical, the water. We need your help putting this equipment in our lab so students can touch and feel it and start to, students find out a lot of things. You'll be surprised what students can find. They can find 0-day vulnerabilities, which they did down at Hack the Port, sponsored by NSA. They found two zero-day vulnerabilities for a vendor. Very surprising. College students, they can do a lot if we put the materials in their hands and give them mentorship as well. We can produce the type of workforce that Mark needs if industry partners with academia, not just give us money. Money's cool, but I need I need your domain smart people along with the examples of the infrastructure they can touch and feel. Then they'll start to pen test it, and they'll start to reverse engineer it and do all those things to get smart on it and give you the type of workers that you need.
Yeah, can I just jump in on that real quick, because I want to underscore a point here about the partnership with industry. I cannot stress enough how important that is, because at the end of the day, if you are trying to do cybersecurity analysis, offensive, defensive, risk mitigation, any of the kind of subdomains, and this goes back to the physics point we made earlier, if you do not understand that infrastructure at a fundamental level, you're not going to be very successful in securing that infrastructure. And it's not just the physics of it that's important, but also how do people operate that infrastructure? How do they maintain that infrastructure? What are their operational constraints? What are the things that, we always talk about, the CIA triad being upside down, right? Availability is king. Well, what does that actually mean to the day-to-day work of an operator? If we as cybersecurity professionals aren't taking that type of thing into consideration, we're ultimately not going to make recommendations that actually can be fielded. And so we really need to be partnering better with industry broadly to get that experience built into those things. Like even if it was like a 6-month internship at electric power utility or water utility or critical manufacturing company to just learn how they, program some controllers, learn how they actually do things. I think that experience would be incredibly impactful in the quality of workforce that we have.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I love the kind of focus on industry engagement, right? Some of my best professors at Boston University were folks who were industry professionals that, taught in their spare time so that folks would get that business sense. And I think in this space, control systems and operational technology, it's so important to get that both on the technical and on the managerial side, right? It's one thing to be able to talk about, this device is important. It's another thing when somebody comes in and says, you know what, my number one priority is safety, And this is why cybersecurity is important to having a safe, reliable, and productive environment, right, that maintains a certain quality. That's a very different parlance than, your traditional IT focus that may be, kind of CIA triad focused maybe on data more. So I love that, that thought about bringing in industry, and maybe for the academia community, it's reaching out to professionals in your local community and having them come and do a lecture, right? Participate as like a visiting lecturer, for some of these classes to give that perspective. I think that would be a great thing to do. Same way for our DoD and federal government partners in their training courses. Industry is here to help, and that's across the board, because having a robust talent pipeline benefits everybody, right? So I'd like to circle back to something that Bill, you said earlier about the National Center of Academic Excellence program. So the NSA runs the NCAE program, and there's program guidelines and designations for cyber defense, cyber operations, and research. We've been talking about this for a while. You and I, Bill, in particular, have been talking about this for a while, about maybe we need to have a designation specific to operational technology. Today, there's only one knowledge unit in each of those programs that even mentions ICS, and it's and they're all optional. Mark, what do you think about that? About approaching the NCAE program and with a set of curriculum that's focused purely on OT, including the physics and the safety focus and those kind of aspects as mandatory requirements?
I'm all for it. Where do I sign up? No, I mean, I think it's important to be a little reflective here, right? So like cybersecurity, depending on who you talk to, is still a very nascent domain broadly, right? And I would argue that controls security is even more nascent. I'd actually argue it predates regular cyber, but that's a conversation we have over a beer sometime. But at the end of the day, we are learning as we go and how to mature that. And I think as we've as I kind of mentioned before, our adversary is certainly building their capabilities, but we are too, right? The blue team is also learning and learning that we have these gaps. And I think that approaching, NCAE or other kind of similar types of organizations and putting together a curriculum with that focus that includes, physics and process engineering concepts, I think would really up our game. And I think that it's time for that, because our adversary, we're as discussed with Pipe Dream, our adversaries are now starting to demonstrate very publicly that they've upped theirs. So I think we need to follow suit.
Thanks so much. So a question for both of you guys, and then we'll pivot over to probably some Q&A here in just a minute. The federal government across every organization and agency is competing with industry for talent. What do you guys think that agencies and organizations within government should be doing to encourage folks to stay, but then also folks to come into the career field easier?
So I'll start with that. A little bit of irony is you're asking how do the federal government keep people in the government to the guy who just left 3.5 months ago, but I'll take the shot. No, I think that the federal government has this challenge with a lot of different technical career fields. I think that control systems is definitely one of them. I do want to applaud my old team at CISA and the team at OMB for putting together the Cyber Talent Management System, or CTMS, which has a subdomain specifically for industrial control systems domain expertise. It's a new pay system that allows a maximum salary in the $250,000 a year range, which is and in some cases even more than that, which is more competitive with industry. There's definitely jobs out there where you can make more, especially in this field. But I think government has to take a hard look at how government compensates their people, how they train their people. I will say the biggest thing, though, about the biggest piece that government has going for them is some of the work I did at CISA is some of the most impactful work I will probably ever have the opportunity to do. Don't tell my bosses at MITRE. And it was an honor to work some of those missions. And many of those missions were ones that would only be, you could only do in government. So they have some really unique, really cool things that they don't talk about all that much. And, making the pay better and talking about the mission opportunities and experience and training support that you don't always get in the private sector, I think can make a pretty compelling argument. But if you have somebody who's looking at $300,000 a year job and a $85,000 a year job, that's not much of a decision for you, right? So the government with things like CTMS getting closer is, I think, going to help that in the long run. But there's definitely still a gap there.
Thanks. Dr. Butler, over to you for that one.
Yeah, I want to chime in. I agree with everything you just said. I would say from where I sit, I always advise students, if you want to get our students paid internships and scholarships, that's the quickest way to get a student interested in your. A lot of times students don't go to workplace because they don't know who you are, right? You just 4 or 5 letters, and so what? And I think the mission, not enough said about it's not a corny thing to say I enjoyed it, because I did for 30 years. I got to do things I could never do in the private sector, in the Marine Corps as an operator, and I'd go to jail for it, right? But for government, in national security, it is patriotism. It is appealing to a higher level of your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is appealing to the part of you that will work for less money but have a more rewarding career. So it depends on how students see their role here in the United States and their role in the defense of our critical infrastructure. Some of them see it, some of them don't. But the ones that do see it, if you want these students, you got to talk to them. You got to come to job fairs. You got to offer paid internships. You got to offer scholarships, or you got to offer loan forgiveness. If you do any of those things in combination, that student is coming to work for you, because they're going to be loyal to you, and they're going to enjoy the work that you have for them. That's my word to industry. Whether you be government or industry, if you do those things, you're going to get the superstars, no doubt about it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll kind of tie that up with a couple of thoughts. One, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency, specifically Mr. Fred Renovar, and the West Virginia National Guard. My unit, actually the SIP Battalion, were able to work with West Virginia University to bring a number of students on internships to support a international NATO cybersecurity exercise with a large focus on operational technology. And they're still on that internship, working to support a couple of different efforts within DISA. But watching that relationship between the folks at WVU, my team at the National Guard side of the house, and the DISA professionals has just been absolutely amazing. So kudos to that. And I'd encourage any organization within the DoD or federal government to go look at what was done there and adopt some of those practices. Second, I think the federal government, and if we look at organizations that are being very successful at retaining talent, they all have one thing in common, and that's mission. And the fact that the mission exists and that there's a need for it is incredibly impactful, but it's only impactful when you get to do the mission. I talked to some folks the other day within the military, and one of the things that shocked me is that folks are sometimes staying in positions of technical importance for less than 3 years. And to me, if we're investing money in cyber professionals, particularly in this space, where it can take up to 10 years to develop somebody who is a qualified, capable, and effective incident responder for control systems. We've got to let those people sit in positions where they can continue to progress in grade, rank, what have you, but that they can focus on the mission that is engaging with them. And if we can figure out a way to do that, we will keep people all day long within both sides, both civilian and military sides of the government. So with that, I'll pause really quick and take a couple of questions to the audience, from the audience. So we have a question kind of focused on academia versus certifications. Given that many people working in industrial cyber may not have a matching degree and that certifications exist to bridge that gap, do we have recommendations for certifications or training that could entice government in particular to hire folks? Mark, do you want to take the first stab at that one?
Sure. I think that there's a number of different certifications out there. I think that it's a matter of different agencies have different priorities. I do want to just foot stomp your previous comment. I think it's related here in that, federal agencies need leadership who is willing to invest in the technical career track. You're talking to somebody who worked hard to create non-supervisory GS-15 positions for technical career growth in his agency, which was not an easy thing to do, and it should have been an easy thing to do. So we got to make sure that we have that trajectory for those people. When it comes to the certification question, again, I think that this is a reflection of the relative immature state of cyber as a domain, where there are definitely gaps in what is offered in the traditional academic arena. When it comes to control systems, there's not a lot of cybersecurity control system cybersecurity certifications out there. There's really just not. One of the reasons why the team at SANS put together an ICS team, I guess now 15 years ago, was because of the dearth of opportunity space here, and no one really putting out high quality content, right? So of course SANS has some, but that's not, SANS courses aren't for everybody, right? And so I think there's some other certs out there, but really it's about having the right skills. And I know that certs matter to get you past HR, but I'll tell you, as somebody who's interviewed hundreds of people and looked at thousands upon thousands of resumes, if you can tie your skill in your resume or your cover letter to the mission sets that the department or agency are looking for, your certifications aren't going to matter as much as what you're capable of doing. And so there's definitely some out there. I teach a class that offers one. Certainly, I'm proud of that. But at the end of the day, it's really about demonstrating your capability.
For sure. We have a question from the audience about the cost of Dragos OT cert. I'm happy to take an email on that one. It's just cwisenborn@dragos.com. But there's no cost, and OT cert's not a certification. It's just a community of practice to share best practices and knowledge amongst industry professionals. So again, cwisenborn@dragos.com if you'd like to engage with us on that. Another question, and we'll pass this over to Dr. Butler. From your experience on the military side and from academia, I've seen both folks from IT cyber come into OT and folks that were OT practitioners, right, asset owners and asset operators, become cybersecurity professionals. Is there a preferred approach in your mind, or are both equally valid?
That's a tough question. There's definitely more IT knowledge than OT knowledge. So I would assume just the sheer numbers game, we need to get more knowledge on the IT side about OT. Because I tell you, in academia, there's only a handful of professors that can actually teach OT. And we definitely are hurting in that area. So whatever way we can grow, if you have, they've got the basic knowledge in IT and they can be trained and get out there and get some hands-on, I think that may be the fastest way to increase our capacity. We always have to increase the number of faculty and trainers first and infrastructure, and then we can start to get the throughput that we need.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that too. I think that, there's this whole narrative out there about the IT/OT divide. And personally, yeah, okay, I've seen the divide, but really, I think that we have a lot more in common with each other than we think. And I know some really great people that are really smart cyber incident responders that grew up in the OT world, and learned the cyber piece. And I know some people who worked in cyber who ended up doing process engineering instead for a living, because they like that better, but they came from the cyberspace. So I think there's a lot of I think this divide, while there is definitely some cross training that needs to occur, I think the gap is we perceive it to be wider than it really is, and that when we actually focus down on it, it's not as bad as we think, and there's a lot of cross tie. So hopefully, I'm all about like the harmony, right? Like I think that we can, if we get together on the problem, we're going to be successful and help each other cross train and learn. The best way to success in my book.
Well, and I think it's one of the things that's most fun for me about this domain, right, is that as systems modernize and as we start seeing more and more inclusion of like industrial Internet of Things and technologies that rely on more IT style infrastructure, and as the network actually becomes part of the control system as opposed to just a way to get data out of a control system, I think that overlap in some of those practices will actually kind of continue to blend a little bit down lower and lower as time goes on. But yeah, I definitely think that as folks are doing that and as they're modernizing, that they need to retain a focus on ensuring the folks have knowledge about the process itself, like we said earlier. That's one of the most critical, if not the most critical thing about training OT workforces, that engineering knowledge and that process control, kind of education and experience. One of the things that we've come across within the federal government is that we are not resourced today to add an additional cybersecurity requirement on top of the work that has to be done day in and day out. So for any of the panelists, what do you think agencies can do today with their existing workforce to decrease risk and ensure mission resiliency?
Invest in their people. If you can't get more headcount, you got to get more with the headcount you have, and that's where it comes down to training and education. Investing in your people is something that's going to always return dividends in a variety of ways. But if you can't get the additional headcount, at least get them the skills that they need to be able to rise to the task. That's also hard to get sometimes, but if you can't do that, then that's what you got to do. And honestly, build a relationship with your financial people. I like to say that a lot of the real war in cyber starts at contracting. That's not super sexy, but probably pretty true. Same thing in government. It's work with your ledger affairs staff, work with your finance team so that you're appropriately articulating your needs so you get those resources.
Man, I'm stealing that quote, Mark. That is spot on. It takes a village, right, to make anything effective, and financial and budget is probably one of the things that technical folks try to stay away from the most, but it could be the most important thing to be able to make an impact. So that's another great skill, great thing to highlight, is that there are some differences with what folks at the technical levels need versus folks who might be at the managerial or enabler level. And I think that, that knowledge of contracting and procurement in finance is absolutely critical for us to build this village. With that, we're at 2:00. I'll pass the mic over first to Dr. Butler and then to Mark, just for for a closing comment or two, and then we'll pass the mic back over to Kimberly. So, Dr. Butler, let's
All right, I'll make it
closing
quick.
comments.
I'll make it quick. I just want to echo something I said to you yesterday. Academia needs your help. Industry, if you want the kind of workers that you need, you've got to work with us to make this happen in shorter rather than longer. And something Mark said, look at the people you have. And you got very smart people. They just don't have what you need right then. But your internal training programs are critical. Make sure you stick to them and you do regular training and more specific training. Send them outside to a Sands or to a Dragos. And, you need the workforce. And you got to figure out how to use what you have and try to recruit what you don't have. And you need someone on top of your people, on your human capital all the time. Thanks.
Thanks. Mark, over to you, sir.
Yeah, just want to say thank you to FCA, to Dragos for having me on here. Again, it is people that is going to make the difference in this situation, right? It is, we need to have the right people with the right skills. I guess my parting thought is, invest in your people. You hired them for a reason, then you got to enable them. Sometimes that second part is the harder part than bringing them on board, but invest in your people, and also don't despair. When it comes to, I've had the opportunity to be on kind of both sides of some very public reporting with some very non-public knowledge. And there's always a narrative about how the sky is falling and all that kind of stuff. We have really brilliant people working on this problem, and we're going to grow more of them, and we're going to win. Keep that in mind, right? If you deny the adversary their goals while your process stays online, that's a win. It doesn't matter if they've compromised 5 systems in your network or they had access to XYZ. If they can't achieve their goals and you keep churning out widgets or making power or whatever it is your process does, you've won. And so we can do this. We're going to have the workforce we need to do this, and just don't believe that the adversary is 10 foot tall. They got bosses too.
Awesome. Thanks. And I'll just say that from what I see across industry, the DoD and the government spend a lot of time focused on the technology. And like Mark said, you can have all the technology that you want, right? But if you don't have the people that have the knowledge to leverage that technology and maintain it, that's just, whatever tech it is, it's just going to sit there and gather dust. And I love the fact, Mark, that, and Dr. Butler both, that you guys brought up the fact that to address this problem, it takes priority and focus. And that, to me, when we're talking about people, making people the priority, making people the focus, and then making this problem set one that's recognized is critically important in the success of building our human capital and building our workforce. So with that, I'd just like to thank our panelists for their time and participation in this, as well as my marketing team at Dragos, who kind of put all this together behind the scenes, and of course AFCEA for being the host and providing the platform for us for this event. And with that, I'll hand the mic back over to Kimberly to close us out. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Dr. Butler and Mark, for speaking with us today. That was really tremendous, and what great advice. And I hope, if anything, this webinar encourages people to go into this important aspect of cybersecurity for industrial control systems. Thank you to our viewers for submitting questions. For any that went unanswered, Dragos will follow with you directly offline. Remember to check out that resources tab where there's more information about Dragos and the numerous industrial control system cybersecurity workforce resources. There's that list from Mr. Lee about resources and recommendations. The place to go at CISA for ICS related information, including their free training and resources, the SANS homepage link with their ICS news, training, and security resources, and then the information about Dragos' OT CERT community, which is www.dragos.com/OT-CERT, CERT. Thank you for joining us, and you can continue to link to the archive version of this webinar and see previous Signal webinars on our FCIA website, which is www.fcia.org/signal/webinar. This concludes our webinar today. Thanks again.